In the movie, The Silence of the Lambs, the character Buffalo Bill is kidnapping women and starving them to try to make a skin suit out of their body. The Buffalo Bill character was loosely inspired by Ed Gein, and Ed Gein used to make lampshades and decor for his home out of skin and different body parts, but the actual reality of a killer creating a skin suit did not actually become a reality until 1998, and that's the story I'm going to tell you today. Katarzyna Zowada was a university student in Krakow, Poland. Katarzyna had been going through a couple years of really hard times. She was suffering with a lot of depression. Her father had passed away a few years earlier, and she kind of blamed herself for her father's death. And they had gone on a hike that Katarzyna had suggested that they go on. And unfortunately, in a terrible accident, the father ended up falling and passed away. And she really carried a lot of guilt because she had been the one suggested that they go on the hike. And obviously it was not Katarzyna's fault that her father had passed away. And when her mother had suggested she get some counseling, Katarzyna was all for it. She really recognized that she needed to get some help because she wasn't doing well. And during this period, as she had gone into university, she was, I think, pretty typical for a university student starting out. She changed her majors a few times. She had thought of studying psychology, history, and then ended up deciding to go into religious studies. Her friends at university described her as a really wonderful person. They did comment a lot that she was very reserved and she was very shy, and she did like to keep to herself a lot. Another thing that was commented by students that she had attended university with was her attendance to classes was not very consistent. She would miss a lot of classes that she should have been attending. But one thing Katarzyna never missed was her therapy appointments. On November 12th, 1998, Katarzyna had an appointment at 6 p.m. for a therapy session, and her mother was waiting outside of the office where she would go to get her therapy. Her mother waited and waited, and she never showed up. And her mother knew that this was very unlike her because she had always been very consistent going to her therapy appointments. So her mother was concerned, and she started calling around to family and friends and anyone who knew Katarzyna to see if anyone had heard from her or knew where she was. No one had heard from her. No one knew where she was. Nobody had any idea about anything. So Katarzyna's mother goes to the police to report her daughter missing. Now, the police did not take this concern very seriously. When Katarzyna's mother went to the police to report her missing, they did not take it seriously. They just told her she's probably out partying, she's out having a good time, you'll hear from her. And they also told her that if she hasn't been missing for 24 hours, she can't be reported as missing. So Katarzyna's mother, she did everything that she could. She kept making calls to people who may know where she is, and you know, she would drive to areas she thought maybe her daughter could be. So she waited the full 24 hours. And just to be clear, this takes place in Poland. I don't know if in Poland you do have to wait 24 hours, but I will tell you that in North America, for sure, you do not have to wait 24 hours to report someone missing. So finally, once the 24 hours had passed, the police decided that they were going to look into what had happened and see if they could, you know, figure out where is Katarzyna. And one thing when they started interviewing friends and people that knew her, one thing that a lot of people mentioned was that she was making a lot of dramatic changes to her appearance in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had lost quite a bit of weight and she had dyed her hair blonde. And the students and teachers and everyone they're interviewing, they did mention to the police that her attendance at school was not always very consistent, but very specifically right before her disappearance leading up to it, she was almost not showing up to school at all. And days were passing, weeks were passing, and police were really not being able to get any information or any leads as to where Katarzyna could be. They were watching CCTV footage at places that she normally would visit, like before she had gone missing, sort of her typical hangout places. They were watching CCTV footage to see if they could see her going to any of those places, and there was absolutely no sign of her. Then on January 6th, 1999, there was a tugboat that was in the water, and they were starting to have some mechanical problems with the boat. And the people working on the boat, they realized that there was something stuck in the, I think they're called propellers, like the back of the boat, you know, the motor behind the boat. You know what I mean, like the motor behind the boat. And at first when they're looking in, they think that what it is some type of plastic. They can't quite figure out what exactly was stuck in there, but they could definitely tell there was something stuck. And when the workers got closer, they realized what was stuck was a human skin suit. So obviously they call the police to come out to see this skin suit that's stuck in their boat motor. And they did DNA testing and confirmed that it was Katarzyna. So what had happened to her, and how had her skin been turned into a suit, and where was the rest of her body? The Vistula River, which was the river that the boat was in where the skin suit was caught in the motor, they ended up searching the river and they ended up finding Katarzyna's right leg, and they ended up finding some of her clothing, but that was all that they could find of her body. So they get the skin suit obviously out of the boat and they're able to take it in and have it examined. And while it was examined, it literally was a skin suit. Like a person could have put it on and had someone else's skin on them. Like it was a full body skin suit. And one thing they realized was whoever did this had a lot of skill in what they did. So they imagined that whoever did this had to have been maybe a butcher or a surgeon or somebody who had skills that could do this, because it was done very, very precisely. They also kind of made the assumption that the person would most likely be the same size as the suit. But other than that, they had no leads. They had absolutely no idea who did this at all. Then in May 1999, the police receive a 911 call from an elderly man, and he calls 911 and tells them that his grandson is acting very bizarrely, and he tells them that something is wrong with his grandson's face and that he thinks his grandson may have committed a crime. Now, the grandfather was quite old. He had really bad hearing and he had really bad vision. The bad vision is really significant. He had extremely bad vision. So keep that in mind. So police arrive at the grandfather's home and they are greeted by Vladimir W. When the police arrive at the grandfather's house, so the house that they're arriving to, the grandfather lives there, his son, who is in his 50s, lives there, and then his grandson lives there. So all of three of them live in this house. They arrive at the house and Vladimir W. is the grandson. When the police arrive, Vladimir is wearing a face mask of his father. I know this sounds confusing. So Vladimir had killed his father. The police very quickly discover the father's body hanging upside down in the basement, deceased. What Vladimir did was skinned his head and then wore his dad's head. And he believed that by wearing his father's face and speaking in a very low tone, that people would actually believe he was his father. So Vladimir is obviously arrested immediately for the murder of his father. So they're thinking, okay, we had a skin suit that we found, and this guy is wearing a face mask, I guess a skin mask? I don't know. However you want to refer to it. So they're thinking these people this has to be connected. Like in Poland, how many people are skinning people and then wearing the skin, right? They're assuming these two must be connected. And Vladimir and Katarzyna had both gone to university together. They didn't know each other, but they had both attended the same university. But police could not make any link between Vladimir, who had killed his father, and the murder of Katarzyna. So Vladimir was deported back to Russia, where he was from, to serve out a 25-year sentence for the murder of his father. And then 2 decades went by with no other leads. Then in 2012, they decided that they were going to do DNA testing again because there had been so much advancements in DNA since this crime had taken place. The other thing that they did is they also created a 3D model of the skin suit. What they had determined was that leading up to Katarzyna's murder, in either the days or weeks, they couldn't give kind of an exact time frame, but a period of time leading up to her murder, she had been chained up and starved. And then they believed that she had been skinned alive. There was also evidence that Katarzyna had been assayed before and after her death. Even with this new testing that they were doing, it still was not going to be until 2017 when the police received a letter that they were going to get a good, solid lead. And in the letter, the friend of Robert's stated that Robert had always had quite a bit of an obsession with the Katarzyna crime. And he also had mentioned that Robert would go and visit Katarzyna's grave often. And just to be clear, Robert and Katarzyna, they didn't know each other. So it's not like this is someone who knew Katarzyna who was going to visit her grave. Robert and Katarzyna, they had no idea who each other were. So there was no reason for this man to be going to her grave and as often as he was going. And the other thing was he also lived very, very close to the river where the skin suit was found. Now, when police received this letter, they had already had their eyes on Robert, because what police started doing was they started monitoring Katarzyna's grave, hoping that maybe whoever the killer was would come to her grave, because it's very common that killers will go back and visit the body. If it's somewhere where no one knows where it is, they will go. And then if it's a grave, sometimes it's quite often that they will go. And they started noticing Robert was at her grave, and he was there a lot, and he was showing up in the middle of the night. So police, he was already on their radar, and they were already suspicious of him before they even received the letter from Robert's friend. And in Robert's childhood, he had some of the typical behaviors that killers generally have, where he had hurt animals, and he was very outcast at school, and classmates who knew him as a child said that he was very strange. They also looked into Robert's work history, and he had been in the military, and when he was in the military, he worked in the morgue. He then, after that, got a job working at a lab where they would do testing on animals. And Robert ended up getting fired from that job because he was torturing and killing rabbits. Robert had also been caught on quite a number of occasions of being a peeping Tom and, you know, peeking in windows of women at night. And so everything was coming together. So the police were obviously able to get a search warrant for his apartment, and everything they needed was there, because he was still living in the same apartment that he had been living in back when Katarzyna had been murdered. And 2 decades later, they very easily, under appliance, they found Katarzyna's DNA, blood, hair. Like, there was DNA of hers all over the apartment. So Robert is arrested, charged with Katarzyna's murder, and goes to trial. They had a closed trial. So I'm not sure exactly how the privacy laws work in Poland, but what we know is that he went on trial, he was found guilty, and he's in prison, but we don't know what his exact sentence was, but he was found guilty and put in prison for the murder of Katarzyna. So that is the end of today's story. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, please stick around and watch another video. So I'd love to know your thoughts below, especially about the skin suit. And it's so bizarre because as I'm researching this and Vladimir comes up, the guy who had worn the skin mask of his father, I was like, yeah, obviously it has to be him, but it wasn't. So there was like these 2 people thinking, I don't know. It's really, I don't know, skin suit. Jeez. And I know I've been kind of MIA and not uploading very consistently in the last 2 months. It's summer here. If you don't know, I live in Canada and there's a lake like 5 minutes from my house. So I only have 2 months the whole year that I can swim at the lake or go to the ocean to swim. So I've been at the lake, not doing YouTube very often, but just to let you know that now everything's going to go back to normal and there will be a new upload every week. And starting in September, we are going to go up to 2 uploads a week. So if you are ready to start seeing lots of videos from me, definitely hit that subscribe button. And if you would like me to cover any cases, you can leave those in the suggestions in the comment section of any video, or you can send them to me on Instagram, whatever you prefer. So I hope you guys have all really enjoyed your summer, and do something today that makes your soul happy, and I will see you in the next one.